think it's an issue, right?
I got you.
Issue. So we'll just go ahead and we'll trudge on, so to say, and we'll talk a little bit more. So we did a little bit of data collecting, I think, and it's interesting collecting data through conversations. So Maria did some work with questions there.
Yeah, so the first time we sat down and started discussing about this learning action circle, we realized that inclusion is such a broad topic, and we couldn't have like actually one definition. We all had different definitions for it. So we said like, what's the best way to define inclusion, but like in the way of Maddie and what the context is around us. So we went around and we asked some faculty and some students for them what was inclusion and what was important for them from a polarities perspective. So we got really interesting answers, especially from Stetson. He was really helpful. But one word that stuck out a lot was diversity, and that like made us think, well, diversity is a really important part for the engineering program here at JMU, and like if we want to promote this inclusion culture within us, then we have to work on our diversity, and like how do we think about it and how we improve it in the future.
So I'm kind of looking at our presentation here. We have a graphical and showed you about what we see diversity as. So I'll try and describe it as words without the help of graphics. But diversity, I think a lot of times when you ask someone what does diversity mean to you, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, like going to an Indian cuisine restaurant, or like different cultures, like places of the world. And while those things may be parts of diversity, it's really important to understand that diversity is a much more deep-seated vocabulary word that can be used. It encompasses a very broad topic. What we decided to use here to just demonstrate this is you can think of the iceberg graphic metaphor that a lot of people see is you see a little cap above the water. But beneath the water, there's a very broad, very, very large iceberg that your ship might run into and sink. So we use the fact that we have two, before you, apparently white males standing in front of you. Would someone think that we are a diverse group? Well, you know us, so yes. If you hadn't met us before, would you think we were a very diverse group? I dare to say that we probably wouldn't be. Because on the surface, we're appearing as white males, but below, we both have completely unique experiences to ourselves. And that by being diverse, it means that, hey, I'm married. I have a wife. Maybe I could talk to Jamie about, relationships on a level that maybe Jesse never could. And at the same time, I mean, Jesse has a lot more. Can you go into something else that maybe you have that I don't have?
Oh, I mean, we talked to some degree about this yesterday. The difference between Michael, you value faith above very much, while I value spirituality above faith, and making that distinction that I can connect with someone who may not share, say, the Christian belief a lot easier than I think Michael might. And having a team of people who can connect at all these different levels is how we start moving towards this idea of inclusive excellence, which is, I think, something that we all want for this program.
So, Jesse, can you move us on? And I've got the list here in front of us. These are technical problems. But we do have some polarities listed.
So we, as was mentioned a little earlier, we talked about we talked too many different perspectives, and we were able to get a top-down perspective and then the bottom-up perspective by talking to the department head, but also by talking to students. And so some of the polarities that popped up were the difference in learners and teachers, research versus education, theory and practice, interdisciplinary or disciplinary. So we have a list of about 20 different polarities that we collected, and we narrowed them down into just 4. So breadth versus focus, accessible versus private, theory versus practice, and profile versus person. Now, breadth and focus. This kind of comes into play with, say, the difference between a disciplinary approach to a problem and an interdisciplinary approach to a problem. Or, okay, do we focus really heavily on the the mechanics of this problem, or do we take a step back and look at the system that it is a part of, and maybe where that item is failing could be as a result of the greater systemic piece and not because of something very narrow. So accessible and private. This is actually something that came up when we were talking about the spaces and availability of resources, and how do we manage the polarity of having all of these great spaces available to those who want to use them, but also maintaining that availability in the future can be very difficult. Do you want to talk about theory and practice?
Yeah, sure. It's theory and practice is huge. It's something that came up earlier when Dr. McLeod was like, hey, people in industry, they really don't like it when people can't actually go out in the field and get something done. They really don't like it when they say put 2 bolts here and only one can fit. And theory and practice polarity exists greatly because, I mean, we do have time. I know personally because I'm a senior student. We hammer in theory. We go through the rigor of differential equations and deriving system equations of motion. We do these theoretical things. But on the practice side, you could think of something being on the polarity side of practice being a vocational school. Don't worry about why it works. Just screw here, bolt here, measure here, report out. So it's just one of those more topics that we can say, how can we find a balance in between that? And I think our leadership program is a good example of balance. Because we spend a lot of time in a textbook. We spend a lot of time working with theoretical models. But then we actually go out and apply what we learn in a real setting, and you learn pretty quick, what you can read in a textbook and say I can do rarely connects with what you actually need to say and do. And it's just one more. So we have one more, the profile versus personal. Maria talked about.
Profile versus personal evolves into the labels and the prejudgment we may have sometimes. So we have the profile of Michael, which is an awesome student. He's an engineering student number 37. But we have Michael as well, the person who loves coffee and is an awesome leader. So how do you manage both sides of a person? Like, how do you leave those prejudgments behind sometimes and stop using the labels that we're taught to use, and kind of breaking that barrier and using it as your favor, because Michael could be a great addition to your team, but because you may not realize that he's a great person, then you're missing something there. So how do you bridge that gap among the students and faculty?
Sweet. I think we have a presentation of. All right. We're moving on to slide number.
How do we manage these polarities?
So the first most important thing to managing polarities is being aware that there are polarities, within this college, within this major. And then once you are aware of those polarities, you can start to act on it. Structure isn't the most important thing, but, individual acting on those polarities, trying to realize what they are and trying to mitigate them. And what we're doing right now, having faculty, staff, and students come together to make decisions about where our program is going, that is, helping to manage these polarities. And the last thing that we have, Michael was able to pick it up from our guest speaker this Wednesday, John Craver. And it's not about making a program, it's about cultivating the culture of understanding how to understand others. And I kind of see that as, implementing a program is like treating the symptoms of a backache. You're just, glazing over them, you don't really know what the deep root is. But if you're cultivating that culture, you get to the root of the problem, and you need to make sure that all the individuals are, understanding others. So getting to the root of those polarities. And some possible small bets that we have. So Dr. Prokis, she went to a workshop for the American Society of Engineering Education, and they had these footprints along the floors that had all these statements. And she thought it would be a good idea for during Engineering Week we could have these footprints on the floor with all these statements. Be the change you wish to see. Cultivating a climate of diversity starts with you. And when you're walking to class, that's usually when you're thinking, and just seeing these footprints, it could really get you thinking about polarities and inclusion that could be in our college. And the last part is connecting with engineering ambassadors. Those are a group of mainly sophomores. So the leadership program, we're juniors and seniors, so we had that connection, and we're connecting to the first years. So sophomores are kind of left out, so we really want to make a stronger connection with the engineering ambassadors and have that bridge between all the different years.
So Dr. Barakas also made these awesome suggestions that I think would be applicable in a short-term kind of thing. For example, we can survey what people like is thinking. Maybe they have some kind of they feel like there's something that needs to be improved on. Create the awareness side of it. I think we spent a lot of time talking about that in the summer workshop, and I think that us like in the leadership program are really emphasizing that being aware is really important for the people like around you. Creating conversation and like creating an environment where people is comfortable to share their feelings and like that for me that would be the first step of change. And then finally just interactions within us. Jen Graver, the speaker we had on class, he was talking about Google, how they use these strategies to foster collaboration within the teams. So like kind of like at first it will be forced, but as time goes on it will be natural for us, not engineers, to share and like need that interaction with other classes.
Sort of sum up on some of these pieces. Managing inclusion is a really big task. And looking at university here versus university there's a lot of programs that say, hey, we have this club of people who might be a minority or who might deal with something that others don't deal with. We have a huge list here at JMU. So outwardly, it really does come apparent that James Madison University values diversity and inclusion. But what some of those programs might fail to do is to say hello to a person in the hallway. So what we really want to do overall is set up as much connection so we have the most opportunity to be aware and then say those things like Setson, how's your day going?
It's going fantastically.
It's going fantastic. So with that, Jesse, do you want to explain what you're passing out?
Yes, so we have crafted a outline. I really love it if each individual could read and think about for a few moments, and then if you could write a minimum of one sentence of response, that would be really helpful for us moving forward into some next steps.
You can make sure that one of us four gets this before you leave, because I think we're a little over on time.
Jamie? Help out? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right.
Thank you very much. Our numbers are dwindling. Thank you.